Hello and welcome to the world of Rob Zombie, a world that is controversial, that is loved, that is hated by all parts and spectrums of the horror community, and makes non-horror fans look at it and say, yeah, I'm slowly backing out of this room, my man, and there's nothing you can do about it. So, that is the movie we're gonna discuss today. We're gonna discuss all the gory details about this world and discuss some of the good parts and some of the bad parts of Rob Zombie, because even though I have some opinions of Rob Zombie that would make a Rob Zombie lover want to crucify me. I still love some parts of his filmmaking. That you will see today. I also hate some parts. And some parts I feel about. But before we go into discussion, I want to end on a quote written by Rob Zombie that I think transcends Voltaire and Socrates, transcends all the philosophers of time. And that quote is, Bitch, I will crawl over there and skull fuck you! You love this movie.
I do, and it took me a really, really long time to get to that point because there was a point in time where I think I was like every other Halloween fan at the time when it came out. Like I love the original Halloween. So, and I was never like a huge fan of Rob Zombie back in the day. Like I liked The Devil's Rejects and I liked a couple of movies that he had made, but I think overall his aesthetic to me was not my vibe. So I think when Halloween first came out, I was very like hard on it. Like I was very critical on it. I was like, Michael Myers doesn't need a backstory. Michael Myers doesn't need this. We don't need all this like exposition on why he is the way he is. We don't need a reason. It's scarier without a reason because in the original Halloween, he doesn't have a reason. He's just evil for the sake of, the fact that he's just evil. And that to me was a lot scarier for the original Halloween, but I also now that I'm older, I've also recognized that that was a different time back in like the 70s when that movie came out. Yeah, that was scary back at the time. But I feel like if Rob Zombie would have still gone that route today, I don't think it would have been as scary. And I appreciate now that he like completely went a different route as far as like the Halloween movies go. Cause like the first half of the movie um like is nothing like the original Halloween. And then you get to like the second and third half of the movie, and it's basically like almost a shot for shot recreation of the original practically. So I appreciate that there is some um difference between the two now. So
Yeah, and for me, the fact that he's this evil force and that is all that is, for me, that just becomes annoying because
yeah.
it just gives like this pass of how can he survive a crowbar to the face? He's evil. How can he bust through a door like he's the Kool-Aid man? He's evil. Like that's the pass for everything. So for me, they can flush that down the toilet, give me an explanation so I know how this guy can survive all this shit. I mean,
Right.
from if you look at this entire series, this movie doesn't explain anything how this man can survive anything
Yeah.
like that. I mean, he's only human. Sure, he's the size of a football field in human size,
Yeah.
but he's human. He doesn't have supernatural powers. He doesn't have a Celtic cult and all that. And I do appreciate what Zombie did. To quote Zombie himself in the interviews, I didn't want to piss in the Holy Grail. That is what he said when he was going to remake this thing, because he was calling to a
Mm-hmm.
meeting by Harvey Weinstein, and Harvey Weinstein looked at him and said, Halloween. And he responded, Great movie, what do you want with me? And he said, I want you to remake it. And he said,
Mm-hmm.
well, then I have to go in a completely different direction because I don't want to do a shot for shot remake. And
Yeah.
I mean, the movie starts off with my main problem with the movie, so I can start off talking about it. And that is how he goes about this explanation. I would have loved this middle class family. Like, what makes a 60-year-old kills his sister in every Joe America? What
Yeah.
makes someone do that? In this movie, it's redneck white trash America.
And
Yeah.
that makes sense why you would kill these people. I mean, the sister maybe not as much, but I mean the dad, sure.
Yeah.
So I mean, it doesn't have that interesting element. I mean, that's why I love Walter White, because that's
Mhm.
an average Joe, boring guy that becomes a mass murderer, and they actually go into detail about how that is, and I love it. And here it is like, oh, they were mentally torturing him, and his family was a piece of shit. Of course, he can be a
Yeah.
serial killer because of that.
Right.
So it's an interesting concept, but it's in execution it becomes too Rob Zombie.
Yeah, I think that's like that was one of my biggest problems with it when I was growing up when I first saw it was just like literally like the first scene probably has a million fucks in it. It's like fuck this, fuck that. Like it gets to a point where
Wah, wah.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It gets to a point where it is a little bit over the top, but at the same time I do feel like there is somewhat of a realistic approach going towards it because I feel like there are people like that do talk like that in real life. Like there are people
Yeah,
that come from, low class families like that who that's, their daily that's their daily way of talking to each other. It's just like fuck you bitch, blah 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 blah, like all this stuff. And I also really kind of like the explanation in Rob Zombie's film of why he becomes the way he is because Josh and I from Horror Movie Crew, when we did my Rob Zombie episode a while back on the We Love Horror podcast, we talked about that topic extensively. We kind of talked about how, you look back at like these serial killers in real life and you realize that, some of them came from very low class families. They were abused growing up. They were, mentally abused. They were made fun of, and that's a lot of what contributed to what they ended up doing later on in their life. And I feel like Rob Zombie took that approach of less of the supernatural approach and more of like the realistic approach of what makes somebody become a serial killer or what like triggers someone to actually go through with killing somebody. And I like the fact that he actually, as I stated before, at first I think I was a little, like we don't need that, blah 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 blah, because I was so like stuck on the fact that I thought it was scarier for Michael Myers to not have a backstory, to not have a reason to kill and stuff like that. And I do still like that whole aspect of the original Halloween. However, I feel like if, like I said, if Rob Zombie was to go that route again, I feel like there would be nothing new to offer for his version, if that makes sense.
it does make sense. And I mean, sure, the fact that it comes from a low class family, I mean, in a way that is interesting to see the birth of a serial killer from a low class family. Problem is that John Carpenter set up an option for having this um, middle class America kid killing his sister, and I think that is so much more interesting to explore because
Mm-hmm.
I mean a serial killer from a low class neighborhood, that's in a way is I should say almost stereotypical that um, people like view low class people as people that could be serial killers or do these horrific crimes.
Yeah.
And what is interesting about John Carpenter's concept is it flips that
Mm-hmm.
you're don't just because you're not low class doesn't mean that you become a serial killer. You can be any
Exactly.
class and you will kill people, and you will kill
Yeah.
people at a very early age because you saw the opportunity or something snapped. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's more interesting. And
Definitely.
I mean there is a lot of interesting stuff in the backstory that Rob Zombie sets up. I think Loomis is way more interesting in this one.
Oh, definitely. He has more of a like a personality, I feel like. And you almost like, because I feel like in the original Halloween, you don't get much of a backstory to really truly feel sorry for Michael at all. You know, you're just kind of like thrown into the situation where it's like, oh, okay, he killed his sister. Okay, you know, and it's great. I love that because the opening scene is so shocking when you've never seen the movie before, because you don't realize it's actually a child until, you know, the reveal of it. But what I like in Rob Zombies is that you actually kind of almost feel bad for Michael in certain parts, because there are parts where he snaps out of it and he doesn't really remember doing what he did. So there's times when he's in the, you know, in the mental hospital with Loomis and he's trying to recount what happened, and there's certain moments where he doesn't remember, because he asks him, you know, do you remember the night, you know, that it happened? And he's like, well, do you mean like getting candy and going trick or treating? And he's like, no, you don't remember like picking up a knife and, you know, stuff like that. And he's like, no, I didn't do that. And then you get that one scene where he's just like, I want to get out of here. And he doesn't understand why he's stuck there. And, you know, you do kind of feel sorry for him in a sense. So I do appreciate that Rob Zombie gave him more of like a personality.
Definitely, because he hasn't really had a personality in the previous movies.
Yeah.
He has been very much of a stone cold killer. Yes, and I appreciate that attempt to give him a personality, and I also love the concept of him basically having blackouts during these
Yeah.
killings. That he, and you can see that more in, you can see it partially in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, where the mask comes on when he kills.
Yeah.
He doesn't have, when he doesn't kill, he doesn't have the mask. And it feels like he has this idea that when Michael Myers kills, that's when evil takes hold.
Yeah.
And he has this blackouts because when that mask comes on, it's not him. He is snapped out of reality. It's the other half that comes in. So maybe you could view it as a schizophrenic person, a split personality,
Or
perhaps.
psychosis or something. Yeah.
Something like that. And it's this, sure, you don't want to over explain something, but it's this very interesting concept that I see in both movies. And I just had wished that instead of writing fuck 1,000 times in your screenplay, develop this concept, because I love some of the concepts that Rob Zombies bring forth.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating. I mean, some people dislike Rob Zombie because his movies is this low class, this redneck style, this exploitation times 1,000 style. For me, that's not
Yeah.
the main issue. My main issue is he clearly has these great ideas and he doesn't develop them. And you can see signs from times to times that he is capable of developing. He's
Yeah.
not just an idea guy that can put out 1,000 ideas and can't develop them. He can actually show to develop these ideas. And it's baffling. Why do you don't develop these ideas? Because that
Yeah.
would work so great if you want a backstory on this guy. Like, what is this thing?
Yeah. Yeah, I think he could benefit. He could definitely benefit from having more of a, I don't know. See, and I don't know the whole like backstory with how he makes his movies. I know he's very much involved in them, you know, from like the whole process in itself. I know he's very involved, but I think maybe he could benefit from having maybe somebody else, you know, help him with these films and kind of be like, you know, maybe we should develop this here and, you know, focus more on what, you know, this subplot or this, you know, representation of something means, and go with that instead of just, you know, focusing on things that don't necessarily need to be focused on as much, if that makes sense. I feel like some of his films, and I will say, like, as I said before, I think growing up and having much more of a mature way of thinking when it comes to, you know, different kinds of cinema, I do think that Rob Zombie does have his own unique style. I think he has a very unique aesthetic. Like, I don't see a lot of directors who go as like far as Rob Zombie does with certain things, but there are certain things that I wish he would go further with, as you were saying, like, there are certain things that he touches on, but it's just like surface level. If he would dig a little bit deeper with certain things, I think it would make the story a lot more dynamic, a lot more interesting. And sometimes I feel like a lot of it is solely based on like the style, like the grindhouse 70s grunge thing. He focuses a lot more on that than he does on like certain things that could be improved upon, if that makes sense.
It does. And that really makes me wonder about monsters because I mean,
Yeah.
how does he pull? I would love to see a Rob Zombie movie where it's the most non-Rob Zombie thing that ever created. I would absolutely love him to step out of that grindhouse style.
Hmm.
And but Rob Zombie is an interesting filmmaker because he has his family,
Yeah.
even more so than Mike Flanagan. I would almost say because Mike Flanagan, he can change people or change it up with some crew member or something. Rob Zombie, he has the same crew almost. I mean, I could be wrong on some parts with the same crew, but a lot of people has worked since the beginning, and they're still working on every Rob Zombie movie
Yeah.
religiously. He's Clint Eastwood. If you want to work on a Clint Eastwood movie in a higher position, you must have known him for like 30 years
Yeah.
at least. And the kills in this movie is made by Wayne Tooth, and
Mhm.
the mask is also designed by Wayne Tooth, and he has worked with him since House of a Thousand Corpses. He
Yeah.
is a key artist. He was a key artist for KMB, and then he started to do his own show with Rob Zombie. Then from 2012, he simply makes his own makeup, and mainly for Rob Zombie,
Yeah.
music videos for movies.
Which is great. I mean, the makeup effects in this movie are great. I think the mask, honestly, is one of the best masks in the series. In this one, I love the way the mask looks, especially when Michael first gets back to the house after he breaks out of the asylum and he pulls the mask out from under the floorboards. I like that it's like rotted and that it's like old, because I find it.
Wait,
I would
my
have had.
cat, my cat wants out. He's giving me a
Oh,
stink
okay.
eye. Freedom, freedom. So
Be free.
be free, my squeaking friend. So continue on the mask.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just saying, like, I appreciate the fact that there was a lot of detail directed towards like the makeup effects and the mask itself, because I feel like it would have been so unrealistic if he was to pull this mask that was underneath the floorboards for like 15 years and it's like completely brand new still. I like that the mask is
In
basically.
condition.
Yeah, exactly. I like that the mask is rotted and it's, falling apart, and it just looks cool when he's wearing it. And then I really love in the second movie how how it's even more deteriorated, and there's that scene where, half of his mask is gone. I think that's really cool. Like, I think the idea behind the concept of what he looks like, and the actor that plays him, Tyler Mane, is just fantastic. Like, in my opinion, he's the most brutal Michael Myers that we've ever had. Aside from, I'm assuming, Halloween Kills, we're gonna have a pretty brutal Michael Myers in that too. But Rob Zombie really paid attention to, you know, as far as like paying attention to things goes, he paid attention to like the makeup effects and the mask and like Michael Myers himself. So I'm very proud of that fact. I think he did a really great job.
I mean, James Hugh Courtney is going to be the most brutal 60-year-old to ever grace the cinemas.
Seriously.
He's going to beat Mike from Breaking Bad. But I mean, I like the design of the mask. It's definitely, when it comes to, I mean, there's two kinds of masks at this point: the deteriorated, disgusting looking mask in 2018, and in the zombie movies. In part two, it's half a face.
Yeah.
It's two-face. It's two Myers. So I do like that design, and there was a lot of detail put into it. They really thought that out.
Mm-hmm.
What I find interesting about the mask, though, is it comes from his sister's boyfriend that uses it when he has sex with his sister,
Yeah.
which means that this guy was watching Star Trek, looked at Shatner's face, and said, "Oh baby, I knew what we're gonna do on Saturday night.
That's gonna put her in the mood.
That is gonna, nothing says sexy as William Shatner's face.
I mean, he's not a bad looking guy. Like back in the day, he was pretty good looking, but
he was pretty good looking. But then I wonder, because this, let's see now, it takes place 2007. Then that, when he was a kid, let's say, is a 10-year. No, he's 21, and he's like 12 in this one, right? In the beginning,
yeah.
So that would mean 9 years before, which puts it at 1998.
Mhm.
So in 1998, William Shatner wasn't as sex bomb anymore.
Yeah.
So my question is, did he look at 60s or 70s Shatner? Because that's understandable, as you said. Or did he look at 1998 William Shatner and said, "Give me some of that, grandpa"?
Yeah. He's like, give me some of that sugar, old man.
Every time. Last time it was a walker. One time you wanted to have sex on a mobility scooter, rolling around in the Walmart parking lot.
Oh God.
No, babe, I want to do it on the mobility scooter.
Come on, babe, I want to do it with the crutches.
I read a Florida Man article that it was Florida man steals mobility scooter from Walmart and uses it to bring girlfriend on date.
Oh God. Can you imagine?
I just imagine like a meth head riding down the street with his girlfriend on the little basket in the front, rolling down the highway at like 7 kilometers an hour.
That'd be so funny. Can you she's sitting on the basket of the fucking scooter, just like the one from Walmart. She's sitting in the little basket in the front. She's like, yay, freedom. While we're still on the subject of the mask, though, I kind of also wanted to bring something else up that I almost forgot to bring up, because I really like, not only is the mask like a character in itself, the mask is also a representation of Michael's own psyche, which I think is really interesting, because you kind of start to see the deterioration of Michael as a person. Like when he's still in the asylum, when he's a kid, he's making all of these masks and he's wearing them. And the more he wears these masks, the less you start to see of the human quality of him, which I think is really cool. I think it was a really interesting concept to kind of use the mask almost as a metaphor for, kind of losing your own mind in a sense, because you start to really see him regress. Like you start to see him talk a lot less. You start to see him, go into his own little world where it's like, as you said before, when he puts on the mask, there's like a switch. When he's not wearing it, there's a switch. So it's like, just a really interesting concept to me that he used the mask almost as a metaphor, as like, now that he's got the mask on, like he's no longer a person, which I think is really cool to me.
Yeah, and it takes a concept, and that is something that I complain about that Zombie actually does. Where he takes an idea that Carpenter implanted in the first movie, but didn't really develop, more low-key stated it. And that is that he is no longer human. He is the shape. In the credit, he's credited as the shape. They never say it in the movie, but that's the credit. And that is kind of the idea, that he becomes less and less human with him killing and with the mask on. And that is most likely what, the more he kills, the more he transcends. That might be another further development. And I really like that idea, that this kind of mental thing with him, like how he works it, that it could be so much more interesting and more deep
Yeah.
And I mean, sure, you could just say, oh, he's possessed by a demon from Evil Dead, and this is all one big connected universe, or maybe you go that route. I mean, in this movie, you don't have to explain it in the same way. Kind of do still, but not in the same way. Where
Yeah.
how can this man takes this much? How does he regenerate himself? Because he has to at this point.
Hmm.
And then you don't really have that problem here, so you can just focus on what's the motivation,
Yeah.
and that seems to be something connected to the mask. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I just really like that concept a lot. The fact that the mask almost represents like psychosis in a way. Like he puts on the mask and he can't remember,
Mm.
anything other than wanting to kill people. Like there's just something in him that snaps every time he puts on that mask. And I just
Yeah.
think that's really interesting. And I think, you brought it up just a second ago. I think Rob Zombie did a really great job taking what Carpenter had already done and kind of adding a little bit more to the mystery of it, because with John Carpenter's version of Michael Myers, he's just the shape. He just walks around and kills for no reason whatsoever. And then Rob Zombie really kind of took that concept and kind of gave it a little bit more to go off of. So I really appreciate the amount of effort that Rob Zombie really tried to put into the reimagining of this film. So
Yeah, and I mean you can develop the psychosis theory even more, because in the asylum, first he kills the two disgusting douches of security guards, and that makes sense. They're rapists,
disgusting.
and
Yeah.
they deserve to die. And then he kills Danny Trejo's character,
Yeah,
which is and it's a sad scene.
it is.
And
It's hard to watch, honestly. It's
it's hard to
really
watch, and
hard to watch.
that is another thing I love about Zombie, because I mean, sure, it's exploitation, but you feel these deaths a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
times. When it's a character that's not a disgusting asshole, you actually feel it, and
Yeah.
I do appreciate that, because I have been hard on Zombie, but I have just started to realize that there's a lot of great things about his storytelling, actually. And but in that, if you go back to psychosis, that kind of more implies that he can't connect who is who. He just has to
Yeah.
kill.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a
Exactly.
great white with blood in his nose.
Yep. It just
And
goes for blood. It doesn't matter who it is or why. He just has to kill him, basically.
yeah, and I mean, it's if it were to be further developed, because I mean, one way you could develop that scene is after he kills Danny Trejo's character, you could have a scene that implies that he starts to recognize who it is after you kill him, and you could see that he kind of gets sad. I mean, that kind of scene would have been great.
Oh,
Further
definitely. Yeah.
development,
Yeah.
because you do feel this death of this character, but I mean, it's not developed. You don't feel the full impact that you could have felt,
Yeah.
because this guy actually cared for him. And it's again, I'm frustrated because I see all these great things, because he clearly wants to develop this as far as possible, but something is stopping him, and you can almost you can't it's almost you can't put your finger on what it is.
Yeah.
What is stealing this focus away from being fully developed? I don't really get it, because I mean, sure, the grindhouse style and the exploitation style, but that doesn't feel like the reason. It's very
Yeah.
weird. The more you
Yeah.
look into Zombie, because at first glance it just looks like exploitation grindhouse shit. I'm just gonna call it shit. I'm most likely gonna get crucified because of that, but sure. But it's the further you go down the zombie rabbit hole, the more you see, but you can't hit depth of the bottom. You just keep falling and just becomes darkness.
Yeah. 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 And I think, yeah, like we said before, I think he could probably benefit from, and I don't know how much input he has when he writes these films and when he directs and stuff. I'm sure there's people that are on set that give him suggestions. I'm not saying that Rob Zombie isn't open to criticism or, stuff like that, but I feel like he could definitely benefit more from maybe taking other people's input as well, and maybe, you know, kind of dwelling more on these concepts that he doesn't take as much time to develop. I think he could definitely benefit a little bit more from that. But I think even still he does a pretty good job with this film in particular with giving certain characters likability, because I feel like, and I don't want to jump too far ahead because I don't know what your like format is like for this episode per se, but like with the character of like Laurie Strode, I will say, like, right off the bat, I love Scout Taylor Compton's version way better than Jamie Lee Curtis's version. And that's probably very controversial because I know a lot of people probably disagree with me on that. But I think with Jamie Lee Curtis's character, I think what she did back in 78 when she did the original Halloween was, I think she did a very great job. I'm not discounting that at all. I don't think that she did a bad job. I think just back in the day, she was more relatable to people in that time frame because she was, the all-American, good girl. She doesn't do anything bad. With Rob Zombie's version, he gave, Laurie Strode much more of a character, and her character is definitely more, what's the word, relevant to how kids are today.
Yeah.
Like she's still a good girl, but she still is kind of crude and vulgar. Like the first scene that you get with her, she goes downstairs into the kitchen with her parents, and she's talking about how the guy is a perv, and how he, she starts fingering the bagel and stuff like that. You get like little scenes like that with her, and I just feel like those little moments that he, changes with these characters, I feel like he does a really good job with that.
I know somebody called this teenage version that Rob Zombie hates teenagers, and you can see it. And I don't think that's the approach he was going for. I think it's more he wanted to put it in 2007. It's and
Exactly.
I mean, in a way I prefer this version over 78, because in 78 I think she's kind of bland in a way.
A little bit.
And she's annoying as all hell because she drops the knives like 5 times. I mean, I have never seen a person that clearly wants to die, but for some reason doesn't. It's a 78 version. And I mean, as with other parts of this movie, is you have those scenes that gives a more depth to this character and this relationship. I mean, sure, that is jumping ahead of what scene I am thinking of, but they are making an interesting attempt to establish a connection between Myers and Laurie. And that is based on Carpenter's idea from Halloween 2.
Yeah.
That he pulled out of his ass. And in Halloween 2, in Halloween 2 from 81, in a way, the sister thing does feel kind of forced. In this one, It feels more developed. And it's in a way, sure, I would have loved more development on that part, as I would have loved on every part in this movie. But I do really like that he took up an idea that Carpenter couldn't give 2 fucks about and actually try to do something with it.
Yes. Yeah, and he tries to give another layer to Michael Myers, because you get that scene where, him and Laurie are together, and she's freaking out. She doesn't know what's going on. She just found Linda, dead.
Yeah.
And he comes down and he has the photograph of him and her, when they were young, and she doesn't understand what he's trying to say to her, but he's trying to, tell her, like, I'm your brother. Like, essentially he's trying to tell her, I'm your brother. Like, and I feel like I really, really enjoy that moment, because you see almost like the human side of Michael Myers for a split second again. Like you see him kind of shrivel back into that little kid again, like that, because the way because if I'm not mistaken, he like kneels down in front of her, doesn't he? Almost like he's
I think
like
so.
giving himself up to her, basically. So like you see a vulnerability with him in that scene that you don't ever see with Michael Myers in any other Halloween film. Like you don't see that layer of vulnerability that you
No.
see with Rob Zombies. And I really, really love that moment where he almost like gives himself to her for that moment to be like, I'm your brother, I've been looking for you. I found you, stuff like that. I really love that moment.
I just realized that this movie is more developed than the 78 version in almost every sense, but still
Yeah.
underdeveloped. I mean, it's too early to sum up. I'm just gonna sum up a sentence of this movie. The other half is undercooked almost.
Yeah.
It was so close to a good steak, but it became red meat.
Yep.
And the other half is 78. I mean, that's the problem. That's another problem I have with this movie is he has this interesting concept of what is Michael Myers as a kid. And then that concept in the end, in the execution, I think becomes underdeveloped. And
Yeah.
when that part is over, you just get another version of 78 because it
Yeah.
follows all the beats. He puts it in another environment in all the scenes. Instead of a balcony, you get a pool and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But still, we are watching what would have happened if another director in another era would have made 78. That is what we're watching, and it's like, yeah, it's interesting, but if your concept idea was to do something different, why are we watching the same movie but in another version for the last 1 hour and 20 minutes?
Right. Yeah. Because you get like the scene. Well, even like, and I like these little subtle homages that he puts in this film. I do appreciate that. For example, you get the scene where they're sitting in the library at the school and they're talking about, Linda sneaking Bob over or whatever and all that stuff. And Laurie looks outside and she sees Michael standing out there, but where he's standing in front of the original Strode house. He's standing in front of Laurie Strode's house, the original from Halloween from 78. And then you get these scenes where they're walking home from school and they're literally so when they're walking by that like brick wall when Brackett pulls up and like gives Annie a ride home. So like when they turn that corner, when Laurie says goodbye to Linda and she turns that corner, she's walking down the same exact street that they're walking down in the original 78 when they come around that corner. Laurie and Linda, it's the same street, and like Laurie's house is on the same street. Like it's like literally right down the street from like where they filmed the original like Halloween, like the girls walking home from school, like it's on that same street. So I think it was really cool that he did film in like somewhat of the same locations, but I do see what you're saying. Like it does kind of turn into almost like a shot for shot in certain parts remake of the original Halloween. And it doesn't really, like, the characters themselves are more developed. Like I love the characters in this movie a lot more, with the exception of Linda. I do love Linda in Rob Zombie's version, but I also love Linda in the 78 version. Annie, though, in the 78 version, I'm not a super huge fan of, never have been. But Danielle Harris's portrayal of Annie in this film, so fucking good. I love her version of Annie in this film. So I think what he did really great in the second half is developing these teenage characters.
They they feel more like, I mean, the big problem with teenage characters is that they never are written by teenagers.
Yeah.
And this one feels more like they could be written by teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we will never get the full perspective, but it's that is what I like more and more with modern horror movies, is that they can capture the teens more of the era.
Yes.
Because I mean, when it comes to capturing teens in a lot of 70s and 80s movies, I mean, it's honestly atrocious. I mean, somehow in the 80s, the rebel teen was a greaser.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, all right, when you go up in the 50s, that was the case, but in the 80s, that's a punk rocker.
Yeah.
And in 2007, it makes more sense how these teenagers act and behave with all the scenes with the bagel and her being more perverted. I mean, sure, there's definitely people that have problems with the final girl talking in a perverted manner in some scenes. But I mean, you can't do a final girl in 2007 where she is like her in 78. I mean, that doesn't happen.
Well, and I like that you brought up that concept because I feel like he kind of took a little bit of like a not so much of a twist per se on the final girl thing, but like he kind of took that trope with the final girl being like this innocent, like she does nothing wrong, kind of, you know, been there, done that trope so many times in movies that followed Halloween because, you know, I feel like Halloween, the original from 78, was the one that really started the whole final girl craze because I don't think anybody knew what a final girl was until the 78 film came out. And then everyone was like, oh, that's the final girl. So then you look back at Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Black Christmas. Both films were made before Halloween came out, but nobody considered those women final girls until Halloween. And then you whatever followed after Halloween, you get like all these final girl tropes and like Friday the 13th and all these slasher films that came to light after Halloween came out. You know, you get, you know, Heather Langenkamp in Nightmare on Elm Street who plays Nancy. You get like all these different final girls. And so I'm like, it got to a point like in the mid 2000s, like in the early 2000s, like the 90s, even where it was starting to get very played out and people were starting to get really bored with the final girl, you know, trope. And so what I appreciate about that is that Rob Zombie kind of took that and like was like, I'm not going to make her like this, you know, goody two shoes anymore. She's going to have more character to her. And I'm going to kind of put a little bit of a twist on the whole, what qualifies a final girl. I really like that aspect a lot.
I mean, that is one of the reasons why she's kind of white bread in the first Halloween movie in 78, because she's so, oh, I'm so innocent. I don't like drugs. I don't like sex.
Right.
I mean, you're a teenager. If you don't like drugs, you like alcohol. Preferably, you prefer alcohol, and you talk perverted. I mean, you can be how goody two shoe as well. You will talk perverted in some case. I mean, I have met goody two shoe girls in a way. I have met these kind of girls, and they talk perverted when they're friends. Maybe not as perverted as other people, but it happens.
Yeah.
And so it's just so unrealistic. And we should talk about the mechanics death, I feel. Because we jumped over to the teenagers, but we completely skipped the mechanics death, and that is where he gets his costume.
Yeah.
Even though I would have kind of thought it was to be creepy if he would have that mask that he wears in the asylum. If we would have seen that mask a little, I mean, sure, it's Michael Myers, you can't not have the Myers mask, but I do kind of like that mask, that paper mask he wears.
Yeah.
I think it's really creepy. And you get more development with the mechanic as well, because in the 78 you see a body. In this version, he's on the toilet. It's a second toilet death. The Halloween franchise has started to grow a weird fascination with killing people in bathroom stalls.
Yeah, definitely.
And I mean, in this one, it makes sense because it's Grindhouse, and that's like a disgusting bathroom stall, and it's like he's taking a shit and watching porn at the same time. It's completely disgusting.
Yeah.
But in 2018, it's not, doesn't make as much. In a way, it makes sense, but not as much as in this one, because now it's everything's gonna look disgusting, and he breaks.
Yeah.
And or okay, out of the mechanic's death,
Mhm.
and that includes 2008 to 18, with a guy without his teeth. What is your favorite mechanic's death?
Oh. Probably Rob Zombies, just because you actually like see it. And I think the as you were saying before, like the other mechanics in the other, you know, previous films, they don't really have much to go off of. They're just a dead body, basically. Even in the 2018 one, you don't see him. I mean, you see him get killed, like kind of in the background, but you don't really, you know, get much of a character from him. With this one, you kind of get you kind of get this character's moment to shine a little bit, because he has some great dialogue in this scene when he's like, you hold on, I got something for you. And then he opens the door and he's like, let me introduce myself. I'm Joe Grizzly, bitch. Like, you get like kind of a personality from him a little bit. And I appreciate that aspect, that like, even with these, you know, minor characters that aren't even in it for more than like a minute, you kind of, Rob Zombie kind of gives them something to do. Like they're obviously like they're obviously disposable characters. They're obviously just kind of cannon fodder, but at the same time, he gives them somewhat of a personality.
Yeah.
Is what I'm trying to say. So like they all, each person in this film kind of has like their moment to shine a little bit. Like even the school bullies in the beginning, you know, before Michael kills them, you get that scene in the bathroom, you know, with the nurse before he kills her in the hospital. You get that, you know, interaction between her and Michael where she's like, cute baby, couldn't be related to you, you know. You get like these little moments with these characters where you either feel bad for them or you're like kind of rooting for them to get killed, basically. So I like that he kind of gives you more of something to go off of with every single character, not just the main ones that you see throughout the whole movie, but with like every single person, he gives them something to go off of, and I appreciate that.
Right. Now we're gonna jump back to teenagers. Back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
We're like Prometheus, back and forth trips here. And
Yes.
but what do you prefer? Daniel Harris in this one or Daniel Harris in part 4?
Oh, that's tough, because I think, and a funny story about that is like, when I first saw Halloween in 2007, I did not even realize that it was the same one from Halloween 4 and 5. I really didn't. Like, she literally looks like exactly the same, but I never, like, at that time, never put two and two together. And then, like, you know, a year or so later, I was like, oh my God, it's the same person. But I don't know. I think she's fucking fantastic in both of them.
Yeah.
I think I do prefer her more in the Rob Zombie version, just because I don't know. I feel like even in the second movie, and not to jump ahead on movies or anything, but I also wanted to make that point. You know, you brought it up earlier with the characters, like giving people characters they care about. Annie's death in Halloween 2 is heartbreaking. Like, that scene is
Yeah.
that scene is so fucking hard to watch. And I have to applaud Rob Zombie for that. Like, the fact that he really takes these characters and really gives them personality and like life and stuff like that. Even, you know, even Linda, you know, when she dies, you give these characters much more to go off of. And Josh and I brought this up as well. Like, these characters in Rob Zombie's version are way more likable than the 1978 one, because the girls in 1978, they're kind of fucking mean to Laurie. Like, the
They
entire
are.
movie, they're just kind of mean to her. I mean, Linda's not as mean, but like Annie, she's just kind of a bitch like the whole time to Laurie. Like, she's basically cutting her down the entire movie. In Rob Zombie's version, they actually all legitimately feel like friends. They feel like they've grown up together their whole lives. Like,
Definitely.
there's much more of a camaraderie between the three of them, which I really appreciate. And even like Linda, you know, you get that moment with Linda where she's talking on the phone with Laurie after she just had sex with Bob. And she's talking about how, you know, what Annie said earlier really bummed her out. And she's like, you know, the part about you being a slut thing. And she's like, yeah, but she's like, I don't really give a fuck what Annie thinks, but I care what you think. And it just, I love those moments that he chooses to focus on, because you feel for all of these characters in this film. But sorry, I went on a tangent with that. You were asking me how I feel about the Annie character. I really do like Annie in this version. I prefer Danielle Harris's role much more to Halloween 4 and 5. Not to say that she's not great in both of those films. I just think that she's much more mature in this movie,
True.
and she has a lot more to go off of. So
True. I mean, especially in Halloween 5, she carries that movie, and as a kid, that's even more impressive.
yeah,
And I mean, I think I'm gonna go 4 anyway, because I mean, I have a greater connection to that movie. I think 4. I mean, I like her in this one. She's way better than 78. She feels like a real teenager, even though she was 29
Yeah.
when they. And that is another thing that is impressive, to be 29 and act like a teenager. I'm 20 and I already feel very different from when I was 16, 17.
Yeah.
And so adding plus 9 years, I mean, you feel very distant and very different. So be able to go back as well as she does is impressive.
Yeah.
And she just generally brings good character to the character. But I would still say 4, just because she, in both cases, she does all the things that the movie needs her to do, and she excels at it. But just 4 is better, because 4 and especially 5, she has less to work with, but she still brings in the same great performance, which for me becomes more impressive.
Definitely. I think I just think she's a great actress overall. Everything that I've seen her in, she's really great. So
you're one of those, not to be patronizing or anything, but you're one of those persons that Danielle Harris, if she touches it, it's gold. You say that's a turd. No, that's a golden turd.
Yeah, that's how I am with some actresses. Yes, like Mary Elizabeth Winstead, for example. Anything that she's in, I'll watch it, even if it's like a shit movie, because I'm just like, well, if she's in it, she's at least gonna bring something to it, you know. So yeah, I guess I am sort of like that in a way. There's certain actresses that I'm like, okay, if she's in this, then it must be a good movie, you know.
Yeah. All right, let's compare another Danielle Harris performance.
Okay.
Hatchet 2.
I
just thought about it and brought it up.
It's her performance in Hatchet 2 is, no, you know what? It's actually pretty good.
Pretty good.
I think I was thinking of Hatchet 3 is the one I was thinking of, and her performance in that is a little, it's not bad, but it's like, for me, I wasn't a huge fan of it. I think Hatchet 2, she does really great though.
I don't know if
Like,
I've
you could
seen Hatchet 3. I've seen some parts.
Yeah, like the moment that she comes onto the screen in Hatchet 2, she just demands your attention. And I just feel like that's how she is in like most of the films that she's in. She just demands your attention.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
If anything should demand your attention in Hatchet 2, it's the butt fucking kill scene. How do we even come up with that?
I have no fucking idea.
I mean, in a way, Rob Zombie feels more demented because he has this Groundhouse style, and Adam Green is more over the top. But it feels like Adam Green, deep down, is more demented when it comes to coming up with kills, but you don't really see it the same way, because he's more goofy in his execution.
Yeah.
It's not meant to take equally serious, but I mean, and plus it's less unrealistic.
Definitely.
But it still becomes more fucked up.
Yeah.
And I mean, this Halloween 2 is more brutal in its kills, I feel. Halloween 2 has those impact moments where you just sit back and it feels like in a way like a brick hit you, just because
Mhm.
you're watching this moment. I mean, this movie has two, and but it doesn't not in the same way the two. I mean, it Octavia Spencer's characters were in the hospital that kills, and you just see him repeatedly stab her, and it's just like a wide shot, and you just see it over and over again. I mean,
Yeah,
that
that's
scene always pops up in my head as, wow, the
my
brutality.
favorite kill scene. That's one of my favorite kill scenes in the entire franchise, to be honest with you. It's probably in like my top 5 favorite kill scenes from any Halloween film.
Yeah,
It's so good.
it's just it's just shocking because it's no music. It's just a guy stabbing a woman, and you're just
Mhm.
watching it. And so yeah, Zombie does excel at some points. And what isn't as excelling is the ghost kill, where he dresses up as Bob the ghost
Yeah,
and kills. Let's see now. I always mix those two up for some reason. The ghost kill is, I'm terrible with names.
Linda.
Linda, thank you. I
Yeah, you're
should
welcome.
remember it. I should, but I don't. I will be senile by the age of 45. Let's note. Anyhow, so the ghost kill in the first one, it makes sense because Michael Myers is like 5'8".
Yeah.
In this one, he's 8 feet tall.
Yeah, he's fucking giant.
This Sasquatch comes into your room. I mean, it blows my mind how. Now let's see. Does she look directly at Sasquatch Bob?
Yeah, she does.
I mean, if I looked back and saw this final cabinet
Behemoth.
with a cabbage head on its head looking at me, I wouldn't say, "Oh, Bob." I would say, "Yeah, I'm going to fucking die. Hello, Reaper."
Who the fuck are you? And
Yeah.
yeah,
You would be terrified. I don't, and that doesn't, you didn't, if you can't pull it off, then don't do it. Because, sure, the scene has better feeling than the first one with Ghostina, I feel.
yeah.
But I mean, it gets ruined with the fact that he's 2 heads taller than Bob.
Which that's funny that you bring that up because that was something I never even thought of until now, until you brought that up. And I was like, you know what? That actually makes a lot of sense. Like the fact that she's just like, oh, this must be Bob. It's just so baffling to me because it's like, holy fuck, he's like, he can barely walk through the doorway without having to like bend down to step in. And it's like, Jesus Christ. And then, but I will say with the scene, I love the dialogue when she's like, hey, Casper, the friendly asshole ghost, hand me
I
my
love it.
beer. Yeah. Like I love the change in dialogue. Like some of it's very, it harkens back to the original 78, you know, like when she does the see anything you like thing, like he does, you know, replicate some of the lines from the original, which I do like, but he also puts his own like
Touch
twist
on.
onto like some of the stuff that they say. Yeah, I appreciate that a lot.
And it's, I mean, I have problem with Rob Zombie dialogue when he literally copy paste fuck over
Mhm.
and over again.
Yeah.
But it's, in that case, it actually works because it has some humor to it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I still can't get over the fact that she can't recognize height or width.
Yeah, because like maybe it would make sense if she was portrayed as like a ditzy character. Like she, because I feel like in the 78 version, she's very much kind of like a, I wouldn't say Linda in the 78 version is dumb or anything by any means, but she's portrayed as like this like ditzy kind of like, you know, I don't really know a whole lot, stuff like that. Cause like there's that scene where they're talking and Laurie's like, oh, I forgot my book. And she's like, well, who cares? I always forget my books, like my English book and my math book. And let's see, my French book.
Chemistry
And we don't
book.
really need books. I mean, why does it matter if you have your books or not? You know, like they kind of portray her as like this ditzy, like she doesn't, but in the Rob Zombie one, I feel like she actually is very smart.
Yeah.
Like they don't really give her a lot to like go off as far as, you know, showing us that she's smart, but I can see that with her character that she's very intelligent. And so like it would make more sense if she was kind of the ditzy character like they portray her in the 78 version, but she's smart. So you think that she would be like, something's not adding up here.
But still, even if you did say, how can you not see? Like, I have met both versions of I met versions that are 178 centimeters, and I met versions that are 203 centimeters as Tyler Mane.
Yeah.
You will get whoa when you see a 203 centimeter guy walking down the street, especially built like Tyler Mane.
Yeah.
I mean, I have met people built like Derek Mears, and you kind of feel low key scared, even though they're friendly, because there's yes, you have this back in your head that this guy's twice the size. So I mean,
this
even
guy
if
can
you
fucking
did see,
snap me like a toothpick.
yeah, even if you did see, I mean, you should see that. I mean, I have hung up on this problem way more than any other person has thought about it in his lifetime.
Honestly, it's something I've never even thought of until you brought it to my attention. But now I'm like, now every time I watch this movie, I'm gonna think about that. I'm gonna be like, well,
I ruined it.
Like,
no,
it's not something that's gonna ruin it for me. It's just gonna be kind of something that I laugh about now because I'm gonna be like, that's kind of funny that like he thought of that because it didn't even register to me, I guess, because I don't know, but you're right, it makes absolutely no sense because not only is he like 8 feet tall, he's also like built like a fucking Mack truck. So it's like Bob is some skinny fucking like twig, and then walks in Michael Myers, who's like this big fucking like monster, and she's just like, whatever.
I mean, they should have just had a line like, bro, that steroids really worked out.
Damn, taking me to Pound Town must have really
Bruce Banner
built you up.
Bruce Banner, you wanna do a
something like that? Yeah, something like that.
I mean, in that scene, I mean, now I'm really overthinking this, but in this scene, it starts right with the actor you had chosen for Myers. It's doesn't really add up in that scene. So why do this scene? Well, because it's the famous scene, and in a way, that starts to bug me now because that is like, okay, this doesn't really make sense in real life, but we're still gonna do it because it's the famous scene, and we gotta have the famous scene, and it's like, well, if it's the famous scene, I will just watch the 78 version. Please, we don't need the famous scene.
Yeah, exactly.
It becomes redundant on a whole new level.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
And once we are on the size topic, I always like to, in every episode, I have brought up the marriage between the Friday the 13th franchise and Halloween that has, in a way, come up during the 80s. And so far, I haven't mentioned it, but here it comes. He is the same size as Jason Voorhees.
Yeah.
And
are you talking about like in the 2009 version, Jason Voorhees?
Yeah, but I mean, he in Freddy vs. Jason, he's over 2 meters.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's literally Jason sized. Very, file cabinet of a human being. And so that makes me wonder, was it because Myers has never been that size, and I might be overthinking this way more than I should, but I still wonder, why pick a guy that is that big for a character that's never been that big?
I think that was just another way of him kind of changing like what had been done before. And I do appreciate that because I think that, this Michael Myers is way more terrifying than the 78 one.
Definitely.
What makes the 78 one terrifying is the fact that, he has no motive, he has no reason to kill, he's just an evil force. In this one, he's fucking terrifying because he's like, if I was If I was to go against if I had my pick of choosing any Michael Myers from any single movie to go against, he would be my last choice. I would not want to fucking face off against him because I would definitely 100% not live through it. I would die. He would pick me up and snap me like a fucking toothpick. Like, so like what he did with the character of Michael Myers is, I think, in my opinion, is great. I think he created a really memorable, you know, version of Michael Myers that I feel like sticks with a lot of people after they watch, Halloween 1 and 2.
Yeah, and I low-key made fun of it, but I do love Tyler Mane as Michael Myers. I mean,
Yeah.
he has a kind of a human side, but I mean, when he goes to killing, he's a force of nature. And I mean, Michael Myers, in a weird way, throughout the series, he started out as a prowler, and then he
Yeah.
became more and more of a force. And this is what we have fully developed. A force of nature that when he's basically the juggernaut, because
Yeah.
when he has aimed at you and it will come after you, you're dead.
Yeah.
There's no option for survival if he decides to take you down. He's Jason Voorhees in the remake, this pure force.
Yep.
That, and I mean, just the idea of having this one run at you full speed.
Yeah. Yeah. Scary. It's terrifying.
Yeah, and I've thought about the Friday the 13th scene because he runs after some people, and I don't want to imagine that.
Yeah.
That fear.
that's fear incarnated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is definitely fear incarnated. And I mean, he is more developed in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, however. But
Oh,
we
yeah.
should talk about the sheriff, because that's the one we haven't brought up yet. The sheriff and the
Oh,
ending, I feel
yes.
we should begin on now. And Brad Dourif, as always, is in the first
Amazing.
one, he is kind of he feels like somebody's uncle.
Mm-hmm.
In this one, in the 78 one, in this one, he feels like a creepy uncle.
See, because that's interesting that you say that, because I think he almost feels creepier in the 78 version. Honestly, like he creeps me out in the original. Like the way
he is low-key creepy.
Yeah, like the way he talks to Lori and like the way he like watches her when she walks off, I'm just like, ooh, creepy. In this one, I feel like, I don't know, I don't get like a creepy vibe from him at all in this one.
I
But maybe
mean,
that's just me.
I wouldn't say creepy vibe. It's maybe because he has that zombie grindhouse aesthetic.
Yeah.
Mixed with the fact that it's Chucky's voice almost. It
Yeah.
might be that in my subconscious that I'm thinking of Chucky, because Brad Dourif, for me, he isn't really Chucky. For me, he is Grima Wormtongue and the scientist from Alien Resurrection and the guy from X-Files. That's Brad Dourif for me, but he's definitely Chucky as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can't. It might be a thing with me because I grew up watching the Alien movies and watching
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings and watching X-Files, and it was Alien Resurrection that made me like have this kind of creep vibe in the back of my head every time I saw Brad Dourif performance. Like, beautiful, beautiful butterfly.
Yeah.
And he just gets his head snapped off.
Oof.
And I mean, sure, as an adult, you see it more maybe corny, but when you're a kid and seeing that guy wanting to make out with an alien, calling it his beautiful butterfly, that is creepy.
Yeah, it is weird. Yeah.
So maybe that is what I have in my back of my head, because he's more of a loving parent, I feel, in Zombie's version.
Yeah.
I get that vibes that he cares more about his family.
Yeah. And he really cares about not only his own daughter, but like Lori as well. Like he's very invested in the safety of everybody involved.
Yeah. And I love Brad Dourif and everything. And
Yeah.
I really liked his performance in here. And he's not as good as that scene in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. I mean,
Oh God.
that could be my favorite. I mean, it's hard to say in a way because I grew up watching Lord of the Rings and all the stuff I said I grew up with.
Yeah.
And to say that that is my favorite scene is weird and hard for me. But I mean, I can't think of a scene that beats him in his catalog.
Me either. That scene is so that scene's so hard to watch. Like that whole scene with Lori, with Brackett, with that whole scene is just really hard to watch in general.
Yeah. And should we go to the pool scene, the ending of the movie?
Yes. Absolutely. I like what did you start, and then I will snowball off whatever.
Yes, and I love it that it was on the balcony. Thank God for that. A pool
Mhm.
is a unique idea
Yeah.
because I can't imagine another slash movie where it ends in a pool.
Yeah.
And it's Sam Loomis. Let's see now the actor's name.
Oh shit, what is it? It's at the tip of my tongue. I can't think of
Me
what it
too.
is. Malcolm McDowell.
Malcolm McDowell does a way better job than Donald Pleasence in the original. There, I said it. And
Well, I mean, I feel like the Pleasance in the original just kind of meanders around and just kind of doesn't
yeah,
do
I
a
mean
whole lot.
it's not Pleasance's fault. It's the writing's fault. In this one, it's actually kind of good writing mixed with a good performance. And in
Yes.
some ways, a really good writing mixed with good performance. And I really do like that kind of standoff scene with him and Myers in the pool. It feels more dramatic than the first one.
Definitely.
It feels more amped up. I mean, some scenes, when I really start to reflect it, some scenes, I mean, somebody would shoot me over this, I'm just sure, but some scenes in the original one feels like a student making his movie in film school, while some scenes in Rob Zombie's Halloween feels like that guy doing the same scene 20 years later with experience
Yeah.
behind him and actually pulling off a great performance. And weirdly enough, some scenes feels the other way around.
Right.
Some scenes in Rob Zombie feels kind of like the 20-year-old film student that has no experience that's gonna make his first short, and then 78 feels like an improvement.
No, I totally agree with that, and I think it's important that you bring that point up because I feel like neither movie is perfect. I think Halloween is the 78 version is I fucking love that movie. That is one of my probably in my top 3 favorite horror movies of all time is the original Halloween from 78, but it does have its flaws. But so does Rob Zombie's movie. So I feel like you bringing that up is really a really important point because you're not completely trashing on either one. You're basing you're basing your opinions on, well, Rob Zombies did this scene better than the original, but the original did this scene better than Rob Zombie. So I think it's interesting. I think it's good that you're like comparing and contrasting both versions and seeing like what they did good and bad with both ones, if that makes sense. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I just prefer Prowler Myers in the original. In some scenes when you see the mask in complete darkness, I mean that is way more creepier than the scene where he just looks at him and in this abandoned house, the old abandoned Myers house, and he just looks out on them on the street. Like that's an example of the scenes where just watching them going down the street. That feels like the 20-year-old student, while the completely blackness and her crying scene feels like the 40-year-old.
Yeah.
And let's see now. Is there some dialogue in the pool scene where he like talks to Myers as his patient, or do I make something up here?
No. So the scene with the pool.
10 days ago I watched this movie.
No, you're good. The pool scene, he's basically just telling Myers to stop because he's like walking towards Lori. And so he shoots him. And the thing I really like about this scene in particular is that he kind of does like a little bit of a fake out moment,
Yeah,
because once he shoots Myers and he goes down and he saves Lori, they go back to the car and he like, they repeat that, famous line from the original where she's like, "Was that the boogeyman?" And he's like, "As a matter of fact, it was." And then you get that scene where Michael just rips Lori out of the car. And
yeah,
that's what you're thinking of when he
yeah,
has the moment with Myers, is because he's holding Lori and he's like, "I failed you, bloody bloody blada, like don't like let her go. She has nothing to do with this." That's the moment you were thinking of, I think.
yeah.
And then like that whole scene where he's just hunting Lori inside the old Myers house is so good. Like when he's just fucking like takes the big 4x4, like the big piece of wood, and just starts bashing the ceiling apart with it. Such a good scene.
Yeah, that is a really good scene. I completely forgot about that scene, and that also kind of feels the force part of him. He's
Yes.
not really the prowler of the old 70s days. He will come through the floor.
He is a savage.
Yes, a very savage man.
Yes.
And let's see now. Is there anything more to bring up? Like, what is your thoughts on the final scene of this?
I love it. I think it's great. I really do. I think this is an example of what Rob Zombie's version did better than the original 78. Like the ending to 78 has its moments. Like I really like the whole closet scene when he is trying to bash through the closet and she pokes him in the face with the coat hanger, and then like the whole scene where he starts strangling her and stuff like that. I really like that. What I feel like they could have cut out is the whole scene where she gets back to the house after Tommy lets her in. We could have just completely taken that scene out where she stabs him in the neck with the sewing needle,
Yeah,
like the knitting needle. We could have taken that scene out and just had her go back upstairs and talk to the kids there, and then have him coming up the stairs behind her. I think that would have been a lot more effective, in my opinion.
yeah,
And then it wouldn't have seemed like she was giving him all these chances to get back up again.
yeah,
So what I appreciate about Rob Zombie's version of how he did it was the fact that like he made more Lori much more of a fighter in the scene,
yeah.
much more of like a fucking like, I don't know, like she's much more resourceful. She's much more, I don't know, what's the word? Yeah, you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I get
She's
it. I
just
get it.
she's just much more of like a
He always
fighter. Like
fights him.
yes, in the original one, it doesn't seem like she really tries very hard to fucking stop him. And honestly, like the fact that Lori in Rob Zombie's version doesn't need Dr. Loomis to save her, because in the original, that's always been one of my problems with Laurie Strode, is that she would have died. She would have very well died if Loomis wouldn't have showed up in that moment and shot
Yeah,
Michael. She would have been dead. Like she wouldn't
yeah,
have survived. In this version, Loomis is incapacitated because after he lunges at Loomis, is basically tries to like crush his skull. And that's when Lori runs inside the house and tries to hide. So basically Lori only has herself to rely on to get like to survive this. And I really, really like the fact that he made her in much more of like a proactive character in that sense. And I
yeah,
also like that
definitely.
she gets as equally fucked up as Michael does.
Yeah,
Like when she falls through the ceiling and she stands back up and her fucking face is just like completely bloody and cut up and she's just in rough shape.
yeah. And I don't remember because this is so prolonged. I watched this 11 days ago, so I don't remember the ending exactly.
Hmm.
So I don't. I remember the pool scene. I don't have a detailed description of how the ending is, but I really do like the ending, and it's way more suspenseful than
Hmm.
the original one, and it has those. Let's see now. Is the part where he shows the picture that I told mentioned earlier? Is that near? That's near the end, right?
Yeah, that's I think that's getting closer to like the pool scene.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's when she ends up oh, what's the yeah, I think that's like right about where the pool scene is actually, because she's running and then she falls in because she doesn't see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So I don't have anything more exactly to say. Actually, if you have anything more to add on to this discussion.
No, I think we covered a lot of really important points with this film. I think, like I said, I think the first time I watched it, I wasn't as open-minded as I am now in like terms of, you know, seeing what he was trying to achieve with like this vision of, you know, taking something that had already been done and kind of putting his little Rob Zombie twist on it. I think he did a really, really great job, and I do appreciate what he contributed to the, you know, franchise in itself, because honestly, like his movies are like some of the more movie like his two movies are some of the movies that I watch more frequently than others in the franchise. So I don't know. I appreciate what he did, and I also wanted to say I appreciate you for letting me come on to this episode and talk about it with you.
Thank you. But before we stop, I've done an addition to the end. What is your
Okay.
favorite kill? We end
In
there.
the original or
In
in
this
Rob's
one.
okay. Well, I guess it's not really like really, you don't really see the kill like fully. I like the aftermath of this kill though. I like what he does to Paul. Like when he after he kills him and he attacks Annie, I like that he hangs him up in like the foyer of the house with like the pumpkin over his head. I kind of like
Yeah,
that.
that is creepy.
That was really cool. That was like a really creative way to take that death, I guess. I
Yeah.
like that. Probably that one, or probably the sister's death, Judith.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Judith's boyfriend, when he gets basically fucking his skull basically punched in by the fucking baseball bat.
That is true.
That's a good one too.
For me, it's either the guard, because you could feel that impact.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's a TV over the head.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't say no to that. And
yeah.
it's either that or the mechanic, only because of the dialogue.
Yeah.
But I would say the guard, because TV over the head makes me think of a cartoon, which is, for some reason, I like when kills make me think of cartoons.
Yeah.
That's welcome to my twisted mind. But I think mainly it's because of that impact.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Sure, it kind of defeats the purpose of a kill in a way when you feel an emotional impact in a greater way. But I do prefer it. I really do like it because it adds depth to everything, and I prefer a good depth to a story.
Oh, definitely. For sure.
So that's the discussion of.
Yay. Thanks for having me on, buddy.
Yeah, thank you.
It was really fun. I really enjoyed this episode a lot.
Definitely.